Some connections arrive without warning and leave without permission. It wasn't supposed to matter. Just one night, a shared conversation, a brief crossing of paths. Yet certain moments carry a weight that lingers far longer than expected. In the quiet hours when the world slows down, two strangers met and spoke with an honesty they rarely allowed themselves. They laughed softly, paused often, and listened closely, as if time itself had agreed to wait. By morning, nothing had changed, and somehow, everything had. What happens when a single night becomes the memory that follows you everywhere? Ethan had learned how to keep his life orderly. At 32, he lived alone in a modest apartment outside Portland, worked remotely for a design firm, and kept his emotions carefully compartmentalized. His days followed a steady rhythm. Coffee, work, evening walks, quiet and predictable. It wasn't that he disliked people. He simply found comfort in not needing anyone too deeply. Clara, 29, was visiting the city for a short professional conference, but she lived in Chicago, where her life felt full yet strangely incomplete. She had friends she loved, a job she excelled at, and a calendar always filled weeks ahead. Still, there was a persistent sense that something meaningful was always just slightly out of reach. She told herself that was normal, that restlessness was part of ambition. They met by coincidence in a small bookstore cafe, both escaping an unexpected rainstorm. The place was nearly empty, the air warm with the smell of coffee and old paper. Their conversation began casually, almost politely, but there was an ease to it that surprised them both. Neither mentioned how temporary everything felt. Neither asked questions that might make the moment fragile. Outside, the rain continued, and inside, something unspoken began to settle between them. They talked for hours, drifting from simple topics to the kind of truths usually shared only with close friends. Ethan spoke about choosing stability over risk, about how silence sometimes felt safer than hope. Clara admitted she was tired of moving forward without ever feeling fully present. Their words were unguarded, but not rushed. When one paused, the other waited. As evening approached, they left the cafe together, unsure why separating suddenly felt wrong. They walked through the damp streets, shoulders brushing lightly, the city glowing softly around them. Dinner was spontaneous, unplanned, shared with an easy laughter that came from feeling understood rather than entertained. There was no pressure to impress, only a quiet desire to stay in the moment. Later, sitting on a bench overlooking the river, the conversation slowed. The air grew cooler. Clara mentioned her flight the next morning. Not dramatically, just as a fact. Ethan nodded, his expression calm, though something tightened briefly in his chest. Neither suggested changing plans. They both understood the boundaries without needing to define them. When they finally returned to Ethan's apartment, the night unfolded gently. They talked more than they touched, sharing stories that felt too personal for strangers and too honest to be rehearsed. There was warmth, closeness, and a tenderness that felt deliberate rather than impulsive. Every glance seemed to carry an awareness that this time was limited. As the hours passed, silence became as meaningful as conversation. They lay awake for a while, listening to the city settle, aware of each other's presence. Clara traced patterns on the sheets absent-mindedly. Ethan stared at the ceiling, memorizing the sound of her breathing. There was comfort there, but also restraint. They were careful not to promise anything they couldn't give. Morning arrived quietly. Sunlight filtered through the blinds. The reality of departure returned without drama. Clara dressed slowly. Ethan made coffee. They spoke about ordinary things, as if that might make the goodbye less sharp. When the door finally closed behind her, the apartment felt unchanged, and yet profoundly empty. The turning point wasn't the goodbye itself, but how little either of them said to prevent it. Ethan realized that his instinct to protect himself had shaped the entire night. He had chosen presence over possibility, believing that wanting more would only lead to disappointment. Still, as the hours passed, he felt a quiet regret settle in, a sense that he had let something rare pass through his life without asking it to stay. For Clara, the flight home felt longer than it should have. She replayed the night in fragments, the way Ethan listened, without interrupting, how comfortable the silence had been. What unsettled her wasn't the loss, but the realization of how deeply she had felt, seen in such a short time. It forced her to confront how carefully she usually guarded herself, even from meaningful connections. Neither felt devastated in an obvious way. Instead, the emotion was subtle, an ache that appeared unexpectedly in ordinary moments. Ethan noticed it when he passed the bookstore cafe days later. Clara felt it while unpacking her suitcase, folding clothes that still carried traces of another place. The night had not promised permanence, but it had revealed something important. Their shared longing for connection and the fear that often kept them from pursuing it. That understanding stayed with them, quietly reshaping how they moved forward. Weeks passed. Life resumed its familiar patterns. Ethan returned to his routines, though they felt slightly less satisfying than before. He began noticing moments when he might have chosen differently, answered messages he once ignored, stayed longer in conversations he would have cut short. The memory of that night didn't haunt him, but it nudged him, reminding him that intimacy didn't always demand certainty. Clara, back in Chicago, found herself slowing down in small ways. She started saying no to plans that didn't matter, and yes to conversations that felt real. She didn't romanticize the night in Portland. She understood it for what it was, a brief intersection, not a missed destiny. Still, it had shifted something inside her, making her more attentive to what she truly wanted. They never contacted each other again, not because it wouldn't have been possible, but because they sensed that the meaning of the night lay in its completeness. It had arrived, unfolded, and ended exactly as it needed to. Reaching back might have softened the memory or complicated it unnecessarily. Sometimes, late at night, Ethan would think of Clara, not with longing, but with gratitude. Clara, occasionally, would remember Ethan during quiet moments, feeling a gentle warmth rather than regret. Their connection remained what it had always been, brief, sincere, and transformative. In the end, the heartache wasn't about losing each other. It was about realizing how deeply a single night could matter and carrying that awareness forward into lives that continued, subtly changed by having truly seen and been seen, if only once. They never contacted each other again, not because it wouldn't have been possible, but because they sensed that the meaning of the night lay in its completeness. It had arrived, unfolded, and ended exactly as it needed to. Reaching back might have softened the memory or complicated it unnecessarily. Sometimes, late at night, Ethan would think of Clara, not with longing, but with gratitude. Clara, occasionally, would remember Ethan during quiet moments, feeling a gentle warmth rather than regret. Their connection remained what it had always been, brief, sincere, and transformative. In the end, the heartache wasn't about losing each other. It was about realizing how deeply a single night could matter and carrying that awareness forward into lives that continued, subtly changed by having truly seen and been seen, if only once.